Welcome to Building Solid Foundations Radio. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We're on KCAA 1050 AM 106.5 FM 102.3 FM, or you can catch us on kcaaradio.com if you miss any of our broadcasts. We'll be in the archives. You can also catch us on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, or the Android app on the Building Solid Foundations channel or your favorite podcast platform. Today we're going to be talking to a person who is near and dear to my heart. He brought me into his educational world at New School of Architecture and Design, is George Welsh. And George Welsh is a architect by training, but a construction manager by experience. He also has a fascinating background doing all kinds of crazy stuff beyond just construction management and design. I first met George at New School of Architecture and Design, which is a boutique architecture school in downtown San Diego, where at that time he was running the construction management department. He was one of the founding people in charge of getting those programs going, both the undergraduate and the graduate degree. And I like to say he tricked me. He asked me to teach a class for one term for the winter of 2015, and then just kept feeding me classes ever since. And then one day, voluntold me to take his position as the chair of the program, so which is I still do. He was actually previously on the board of directors for that and some other schools owned by the same parent company at the time. I'm going to go through his whole background because we're going to walk through that as we talk to him. George, welcome to Building Solid Foundations. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So we mentioned New School, and I've talked on this broadcast before with some of the other people involved, faculty and alums that have been on here. If the audience doesn't know, it's an architecture school. We run a construction management program. It's WASC accredited, and we do train people to go into the industry and make really good incomes.
Yes.
It's the kind of program I wish would have been available when I was that age. I didn't know you could do such a thing back then.
Well, actually, when I went to school, it didn't exist because the architects at that point were responsible to the owner from beginning to end of the project.
That's right.
And as liabilities changed, all of a sudden, this niche became available.
Right, and the thing is, architects were never really trained to manage construction from a budgetary and a scheduling standpoint. They're trained to envision projects and design buildings that'll stand up straight and work, along with their consultant teams. But the owners expect them to do all that. The first questions any architect gets asked by an owner is, how long is it going to take and what's it going to cost me? And whatever they say will be used against them in a court of law.
Absolutely. Yes. That's where those liabilities changes came in.
That's right. And so the construction manager kind of fills a nice role. And I remember I started in the CM industry back when it was fairly new. And there was some resistance. There was resistance from the design side, who felt that the CMs were taking fee away from the construction part of it.
Yep.
And there was the resistance from the GC side, the general contractor side, who felt, I don't need some consultant who's not designing, engineering, or building anything to tell me what to do. And then I would say within about a 5-year period, that completely turned around to where all of our referrals to clients were coming from architects and general contractors who would rather have the CM deal with all that garbage.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting. And I think I've used this analogy with you before, is that, the process of building a building is kind of like the process of how an orchestra works. You have an architect who's kind of like the composer who writes this beautiful score. You have the tradespeople who all have to know their specific things. But you have this guy who stands up at the front with the baton, and he's like the construction manager. He doesn't need to know how to do all of the steps, but he needs to know how to lead these people to get the project done.
And if it's done correctly, it's beautiful music. And if it's done wrong, it is a chaotic mess.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, and if you ever sat through a bad symphony, let's say at the local middle school, we applaud them all, but they're trying their best. But it's a little bit rough to sit through those things. Yes.
Yes, actually, one of the car commercials is using a example of that as their music for it. Quite amazing.
Right. So you originally started off to be an architect.
Yes.
And coming out of Chicago, which is where you're from, naturally you would have gone to the University of Illinois.
Yes, and I did. I ended up in the architecture program at the U of I. And after 2 years, I learned that I really wasn't what I would call a good designer. Not that I couldn't design good solutions, but it wasn't my passion. And so I had a faculty member who said to me, George, don't quit. We need architects who can build things. And so my last 3 years was focused on more the engineering and the management side of the things that needed to be done. So when I came out of school, I had an architecture degree, and I also got my architecture license. But I actually was passionate about putting it together, making the drawings come to life. And that's what I was able to do for pretty much the first 22 years of my career after school.
Okay, and you were building homes, bridges, high rises. What were you building?
One of the first projects that I had primary responsibility on as the inspecting architect was a 44-story high rise in Chicago.
Your first project?
That was the first one that I was on the site as the inspecting architect. And it was also during the time when some of these changes happened, because I remember coming home from the field and into the office one day, and my boss calling me into the office says, "We need to talk for a minute." And I sat down, and it was the attorney and the insurance company who were sitting in his office. And they said, "George, you can't go to the job site and do inspections anymore." And I says, "But who's going to count the bars, and who's going?" That's the responsibility of the company that's building the building. That's not our responsibility as architects. Well, but who's going to do? And that was really the break that I saw between, as an architect, providing a full service to my client, to the separation between being an architect and leaving that gap where the client wasn't protected.
And I'm assuming that was a liability issue, that if we are counting the rebars and checking the nailing schedules, all of a sudden we've bought liability for it.
And even the term going out and doing an inspection as opposed to a field report.
Or an observation, yes.
Or
I remember
observation.
working at a company that said inspection's a dirty word.
Right.
You use the term observation because inspection infers you have some kind of a special license.
I was not even allowed to approve shop drawings anymore. I could only mark them as reviewed for compliance.
Okay, right.
Okay, so those are the things that really changed, and that changed right at the end of my college career. And so we were involved. I was involved working for a company that did mid high-rise buildings, and did that through early '74, and then got involved with a company. In fact, we're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of that company this summer, and it started 2 years before I joined the firm. But we built in that one small apartment buildings, 20 to 25 unit apartment buildings, and we built millions of square feet of industrial space.
Okay, that's a very interesting combination.
Yeah, it was. It depends on what sites were available,
right,
and what partnerships you were able to form. So we designed them, and the firm that I was with had an architectural practice, and we had a construction company. And I was the senior VP of the construction company, and I was the senior associate in the architectural practice. So I was responsible for making sure we had drawings that could be built, and making sure that we built accordance with the drawings.
So at that point, you're really acting as what most people go into architecture is what they want to do is kind of become the master builder. But in fact, that's what the role you were performing at that point.
It was, and I didn't learn it until probably 25 years later, that what we were doing was integrated project delivery.
That's right.
Because the company the investors were owners of the company, the financiers were owners of the company, the architects were owners of the company, owners of the projects, the construction company were involved in ownership of the projects. The management and leasing companies were part of the same team. And so we were literally from soup to nuts doing all of the steps that involved in real estate, and all in one house.
The turnkey, right?
Yeah. So we couldn't point at each other and say it's your fault, because it was our fault.
And the most important piece of that puzzle is there's a singular insurance carrier, because my experience was that where things really fell apart was when there was a claim.
Yep.
The insurance company would get involved, and their first reaction is, let's counterclaim against anybody and everybody, including the guy that dropped the porta potty on the site.
Correct.
And even though he had nothing to do with the building. And then we'll try to get them to settle with some amount, and then all the burdens off of us. And so now all the insurance companies are basically creating lawsuits against everybody on the site, and it's become a big mess. Under that particular, an integrated delivery system, basically that insurance carrier is covering the whole project anyways. There's nobody to turn to, so they're just going to deal with it.
Correct. Call it self-insured or call it singular insurance carrier.
We call it a wrap policy, whatever we used to call it. Yeah.
It's a challenge. We've been talking about it since 2008 as a future delivery system, and it's still a future delivery system because we haven't figured out how to ask the lawyers to leave the room so that people can come to agreement of shared liability.
Well, if everybody came to agreement with that, you wouldn't need the attorneys, and that's
Exactly.
not a good plan for if you're a good attorney that's contract or litigating attorney.
Absolutely.
Right, and there's also, the design build. People think, well, design build and integrated design, they're pretty very similar. They're not. They're opposites, actually. Integrated design is everybody's all responsible at the same time. Design build is specifically set up so we have one person to sue.
Correct.
It's a single source of liability.
Yep.
We're going to have to take a short break. When we come back, I want to move further down the conversation and talk about some of the more unusual endeavors you've been involved in your career. In and outside of construction management. This is Building Solid Foundations on KCAA Radio, and we'll be right back after this break.
Fire Up Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. Fire Up Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. Fire Up Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
I love how New School is able to help me greatly with my career.
Because they actually have experience working in the field. The greatest thing about New School is the fact that there are so many different disciplines, which allows you to really understand and get a good insight into different types of design. And I think it's that whole changing mindset of what design can really do for a city, and this is kind of the place to be.
This environment cultivates creative thinking.
Hi, this is Steve Matley. As a construction professional, I know the importance of selecting the right contractor for the job. Power Solar employs only professional installers. Power Solar will provide a knowledgeable consultant to help analyze your current electric bill, identify site placement, and correct solar technology for your home. Contact KCAA Producer at gmail.com for a free financial savings proposal with no obligation, or call 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Again, that's KCAA Producer at gmail.com or 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. Today we are in the studio with George Welch. George Welch is a licensed architect. He's an educator. He's been working in construction management for I'm not going to say how long. That would just be rude. but a long time, even longer than I have, and that's saying something. George, besides construction management, because we talked a little before the break, you were talking about some of the first projects you were involved in, high-rises in Chicago, and we always think of Chicago and high-rises. But you did some other interesting endeavors, not just construction-wise. I remember you told me that you ran a bank at one time.
Yep.
Tell me, how'd you get involved in that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because one of the things, while I was still with the company I mentioned before, I built my own house, and we moved to a really nice community outside of Chicago. And after I'd been there for about a year and a half, I was concerned about how our village was doing its planning, because it appeared that everybody around us could do whatever they want, and we kept losing our border. So I ran for public office, and I became a village trustee. and I served as village trustee for 2 years.
Now, is that like a county supervisor kind of a position?
But smaller.
Okay.
I don't know how you would really. Well, it's
City
a city like Vista has
city council.
a city council, and a trustee was a member of the village structure of city councils. Okay. Instead of a city council, it was called the board of trustees.
Okay.
And instead of a mayor, it was called the village president.
Now, is this kind of a private community as opposed to a public agency?
No, it was a state municipality.
Okay.
And we had several different things within our municipality, but one of the most familiar landmarks is the Kemper Golf Course, where they have the PGA
Kemper
Open
Open.
and stuff, was adjacent to our village. It is now incorporated into the boundaries of Killdeer.
Okay.
And very nice little community, but we were involved in more lawsuits than I could fathom. And it turned out it was just an issue of neighbors were doing things that were infringing on us, and we were filing lawsuits. We weren't resolving the problems. So I then ran for mayor, and in 1989 I was elected village president of Killdeer. Okay. And during my tenure, we managed to resolve all of the lawsuits, and we managed to put together the first new comprehensive plan for how that city was going to grow. I also became the chairman of the Corridor Planning Council, which was looking at what are the influences that will happen to communities for a new interstate that was going to be built through our area. And for 4 years, I managed to keep 17 villages in a room meeting and coming up with common development standards that we could do. So through those experiences that were extracurricular, I learned a lot. And in 1991, we were at the end of a major downturn, and the finances for our company were really getting weak. And I put my nose out the door to see if there were other opportunities. And within 48 hours, I had 4 offers that paid twice what I was making. But they were all involved in chaos management. Projects that were in, best way to put it is third time around the toilet. And so I found that with the skill set that I had developed over time, I had the skills to go in and bring calmness to the staff and to manage to reach in and turn that around.
So your 911 call for projects going south.
Right.
I worked for a firm that did a lot of that too.
Yeah. Well, I was, so I took over a 604-acre recreational development that was in central Illinois, and was there for about 1.5 years when I got called in to, at the same time, run a international electronics firm.
Okay.
And
that's a little different.
now I don't have much training in electronics, but it was the leadership and chaos management that they were looking for. And I went to bed one night, I had 29 employees. The next night I had 479 employees, and plants in 2 cities in the United States and 1 in England. So, so I learned how to run all of that. Ran that company as their executive VP for just under 2 years, and we sold it to an international company. And they asked me to stay on and do the conversion from private to public. So I had that chaos management, that broader financial experience, those type of things that were going. As I mentioned, I was asked to do that at the same time as I ran that 604-acre thing. So when my time ended with the electronics company, I thought, gee whiz, now I can, since I'm spending half my time, 50 hours there and 50 hours here, now I can just go 50 hours in one place and play golf the rest of my time. I got involved with one of my neighbors in our town whose bank had recently been bought out. And I asked him what he wanted to do when he grew up. And he says, I want to start my own bank. And I says, yeah, like, weren't banks created like on the 3rd day and they've been with us ever since? And he says, no, in Illinois, if you raise the right amount of money, you can start a bank. When I was flying back from negotiating the final terms of the sale of the electronics company, one of my board members was traveling with me. And he says, I've got some guys who've got a lot of money and they'd love to start a bank, but they don't have the foggiest idea what to do. And I said, well, I know who, I know where, and give me 2 weeks and we'll have a meeting. And it was the initial meeting where Cambridge Bank came to life, and a year later, we opened the doors of a community bank that we ran for 10 years.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So banker, village president, managing operating officer of electronics firm. Okay. A lot of that's a little different than the working construction management.
It is, but I think what I talk about in my resume, because I just had updated for our most recent accreditation visit, was I think all of my education has led me towards leadership.
Right, okay.
And how do I not necessarily have to know how to design an electronic circuit, but how do I lead the people who do that? And that's kind of where my conductor thing comes into play.
Well, it makes sense. Coming out of electronics, you'd talk about conductors.
Yes. Conductance, although we sometimes run into some resistance.
There we go. Okay.
And then what's that famous word from what meditating? It's om.
Om. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So what?
But no one's gonna vote for this as being a funny show at this point. So
That's right. They'll try to figure out what are they talking about. So we've finished all of the electric jokes, by the way. That's
right.
the entire range of them.
We got it wired. Okay, move ahead.
So because of that, there were people who had invested in the electronics firm who were venture capitalists who followed what I was doing. And because of that, they joined or brought opportunities to me or brought individuals who had ideas to me. And we were able to then go out and form businesses to do that. One of the things we did was we bought a 195-acre railroad yard. Okay. And we started.
So you became a railway tycoon.
No, back to the electronic things, a conductor.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
So
tickets, please.
we got into the transloading of materials and the logistics of how do things get from that train to the customer. And so
This is before the intermodal transportation?
It was predominantly, we were dealing with petroleum distillates.
Oh, okay.
And
so tankers.
We had one customer who, perchance you've seen those little candles at a restaurant with the little clear
candles?
fuel in it.
Yeah.
They would fill 1 million of those a day.
Okay.
And so we would transfer as much as 30,000 gallons of that product to them from the railroads, distilled down in Louisiana, railroaded to us, and then transferred by truck to their facilities.
Oh, okay.
Stuff like that. So transloading, we also did salt, we did potash, we did gravels and materials like that.
A lot of commodity stuff, yeah.
The bulk stuff.
Right.
And so the other thing we had was the site was big enough. It originally was American Motors yard for where they rolled cars off of their production. They would park them in this lot and then ship them out across the country by rail. And so we also had developed a relationship with most of the automobile industry so that whenever there was an issue coming up, we could take up to 28,000 cars and park them on our site. Okay. And they would pay rent for that. So yeah, railroad yard, senior housing, home building. I got involved in a single family.
Production home building?
Production home building, multifamily production home building, and then also into recreational properties. I was responsible overall for the implementation as owner's representative, and one of my companies was the builder of a $250 million resort in Wisconsin. Indoor water park, conference center, hotel, and I built 250 log cabins that were available for rent. We did that in 3 years. 3 Wisconsin years, which meant from April to October.
Right. And I understand that was tied to the Jellystone license, right? The Yogi Bear
Jellystone
license.
was a campground that was adjacent to it, and it all got rolled into a thing called Three Bears Resort.
Okay. We're going to have to take another short break. When we come back, I want to continue the conversation and kind of hit some of this other, kind of tie it all together and figure how does it all fit at what seems so diverse and disparate. We'll kind of look at what ties it all together and how does the same skills, or how the same skills used. This is Building Solid Foundations. We're on KCAA Radio, and we're going to take a short break. We'll be right after this, back right after this. And again, catch us live every Thursday at 3 p.m. on KCAA. You can, if you miss us, catch us on kcaaradio.com in the archives, or catch us on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, or the Android app, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
FireUp Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections. Hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. FireUp Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. FireUp Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
I love how New School is able to help me greatly with my career.
Because they actually have experience working in the field. The greatest thing about New School is the fact that there are so many different disciplines, which allows you to really understand and get a good insight into different types of design. And I think it's that whole changing mindset of what design can really do for a city, and this is kind of the place to be.
This environment cultivates creative thinking.
Hi, this is Steve Matley. As a construction professional, I know the importance of selecting the right contractor for the job. Power Solar employs only professional installers. Power Solar will provide a knowledgeable consultant to help analyze your current electric bill, identify site placement, and correct solar technology for your home. Contact KCAA Producer at gmail.com for a free financial savings proposal with no obligation, or call 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Again, that's KCAA Producer at gmail.com or 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. This is Steve Matley on KCAA. I'm in the studio today with George Welch. George Welch is a longtime acquaintance and friend of mine and a fellow faculty member at New School of Architecture and Design. And George has been recounting his adventures through his career that started off in architecture and then construction management and went into railways, banks, electronics, village president, recreational facilities, logistics, all kinds of crazy things. And that seems like some very different and odd things to get involved in. So they seem very disconnected. But there's a common thread through it. And part of this comes from what we were talking about a little earlier of being the conductor as opposed to the musician. It's very different to play a flute than it is to play a guitar, than it is to play kettle drums. But that's not what you were doing in all these places. You were not putting together circuit boards. You were not issuing loans or going after delinquent payers. You were not filling up the potholes in the street of the town where you were. You were not running the engine on the railroad, right? So
Right.
You were in a leadership position. So let's talk about how those tie together with the same basic skill set, which really comes down to leadership and management.
It really does. And I think the important thing to start with is I didn't do all those things. I led the people who did them. And I'd make the comment before about chaos management, and everybody says, well, we've heard about crisis management all the time. And I always kind of look at business requires three types of capital. You need to have technical capital. That's the ability to do whatever the business is. You have to have administrative capital, which is the ability to run a business. and particularly in that industry. And the third capital is working capital. And if you're short on any one of those, you go into crisis. If you're short on two of them, you're in chaos.
Okay.
And that's pretty much where I found the things that I needed to do. I could bring either working capital and administrative capital, or I could bring technical capital and administrative capital to any of these situations. And so by the most important thing that I've learned in the chaos management side is that the right people are usually there.
Okay.
The leadership may be wrong, but the right technical capital is almost always there. It's this, they're in fibrillation because they don't know whether they're going to have a job the next day. The stress of a company in chaos causes the entire employee staff to really to spend more of their time worrying than doing.
Or updating their resume every day.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, back in those days, we didn't have the word processor capability that we do now.
That's right.
But it was still the issue of you had to have the ability to understand that payroll was going to be made. You were going to be able to be there. Your job was going to be able to go on. And if you chose to leave, you could do it in an advantageous time as opposed to you're going to be dumped out the door tomorrow.
Along with everybody else who are all looking for a job at the same time.
In the same industry.
That's right.
And you're one of two companies in the United States that do that stuff.
Right.
You know, so I think that's where it was really important for me. The skill set that I had was to be able to find those people who were the technical capital, sort through the people who were in the administration, and find who were the administrative capital of that company. It most often meant that the leadership needed to be changed.
Okay.
Whether it was because they truly were not the right leaders or because the industry or finance had decided they had lost faith in them. Okay. So those changes always needed to be made. So I had mentioned venture capitals bringing opportunities to me. What they most often brought was people who had an opportunity.
Okay.
And so I would say that of all of the different startups that I did, or management situations where I went in, I ended up taking people and mentoring them into being the administrative leaders that was necessary for that company to succeed.
Now, was your intention to fix the company and move on, or to stay into the company?
In most cases, I came in maybe as an interim CEO, but then ultimately would become a board member and would be pretty much tied to be the mentor on the board to the person who's installed as the leader of that company.
Okay.
And as a board member, I would be able to reap my rewards over time. The other thing I was very good at is I charged market prices for my services. I just didn't require them to be paid until the company had cash flow.
Okay.
Okay. So that allowed me to invest a great deal of my energy and time into companies and benefit once they were all three legs on the ground.
Okay, so you mentioned you're short on one, crisis, short on two, chaos. What if you're short on all three?
Then you don't have the
That's
business.
closing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. There's a whole section of courts that are set up for
bankruptcy.
that.
Okay, right. And I think that's important for people to understand is can they analyze where they are and realize if you're just missing one of those and you feel like it's overwhelming, it doesn't mean it's time to shut everything down.
Absolutely.
There's probably still some life left in there. If you're missing two, it may seem completely impossible, and yet you still may be able to salvage things. At some point, you have to know where you're not bailing this boat out. It's going down. You're going to scuttle it.
Correct. You know, I think I had a partner once who always used the term of when you're rowing across the Everglades, don't throw your chickens to keep the alligator from eating you, because the alligator will ultimately eat all the chickens and then eat you.
Eat you too. That's right. Yeah.
So
and if anything, you throw the alligators around, it'll attract all the other alligators. So the chickens are floating in the water around you. Yeah.
So So it was really, I think your point is really good though about bringing up, if you're in stress, whether you're in chaos or in crisis, it's important to have somebody you can go to and talk about what the solutions can be. And most often it's not lawyers, because they're looking for either, well, I can get fees paid up front and get any future fees paid through the bankruptcy court, or I've got somebody who will take over the company and you're all out.
That's right.
Okay. So it's important to, when you're building your business, find those mentors who can help you. Because if you are short on working capital and your administrative and technical capital are strong, you will most often be able to find a source of finance that will help you make it through that time. If you've got the money and you've got the administrative capabilities, you're most likely going to be able to hire the technical capital that you need to succeed. But you've got to, what is it? If you plan to fail, no, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Right.
If you don't plan for when things get bad up front, you're not going to be in a boat to be able to solve those problems when those times come up.
Yeah, that's the contingency plan. And I think about a lot of what we do when we design buildings. We design them with places to put fire extinguishers. Now, do we want the building to burn down? Do we plan for that? No. We hope it never does.
Right.
But it might, and we can prevent the whole thing from going up in smoke if there's extinguishers placed at strategic locations. If there's a fire sprinkler system installed, which we hope we never have to use.
Right.
And it's basically the plan B and plan C. The projects I run, people always ask, what if something goes wrong? And I'll tell them, well, two things. One, I will never tell you we haven't had any project go south, because we have. But I'll also tell you we've never lost any investor capital. How is that possible? Well, you can have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D, and there's 26 letters of the alphabet.
Yep.
Each plan as you move down is less profitable than the last one and less desirable, but it's better than losing everything. And there's a lot of ways you can do contingency plans, and it's just alternate exits. And so I think it goes to your point, have in your mind multiple exit strategies or fix-it strategies, because unless you control the universe, things are going to go wrong.
I think that your term fix-it strategies is probably right on target. In other words, if you have 2 or 3 good fix-it strategies, you most likely will never have to get to an exit strategy.
That's right.
At least an emergency exit strategy.
Right.
So, but that requires leadership and directorship focusing on how are we going to deal with things when we're short on cash? How are we going to deal with things when one of our senior technical people leave? Okay. All of those things require fix-it plans that you have already thought about. Because if you start to think about them, when that event happens, you're not going to be able to implement them without going into chaos.
That's right. And a lot of that goes into the strategy of how you're building your business up. So most businesses, we're told, find your niche, find your specialty, find the one thing you do well. And that's not bad advice, except that when that one thing you do is so niched and so specialized that there's one person in your company with the special knowledge, and that is tied to a specific target market.
Right.
And if something changes, let's say a court makes a ruling and it goes away, like what happened to the vaping industry, maybe the legislature changes things and you can't do it, like the Airbnb thing happens, right? They change the ordinances, you can't do that in that neighborhood anymore, or just the overall economy changes, taste change. If that one piece of the puzzle controls too much of this, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
You're out of luck. We're going to have to take another break, but before we go, I do want to just reiterate one of the things you said, find mentors. Okay, we talk about solopreneurs and self-made people. Doesn't exist. Everybody, you need other people. And I'm one of the most introverted, independent kind of people out there. I kind of like doing things on my own, but the fact is everything I've got and everything I learned came from working with other people.
Right.
And being mentored and mentoring others and collaborating and sharing. And it's absolutely positively necessary that you have to connect with other people and have that exchange of ideas. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with George Welch. We'll continue our conversation on KCAA Radio. This is Building Solid Foundation.
FireUp Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. FireUp Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. FireUp Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
I love how new school is able to help me greatly with my career.
Because they actually have experience working in the field. The greatest thing about new school is the fact that there are so many different disciplines, which allows you to really understand and get a good insight into different types of design. And I think it's that whole changing mindset of what design can really do for a city, and this is kind of the place to be.
This environment cultivates creative thinking.
Hi, this is Steve Matley. As a construction professional, I know the importance of selecting the right contractor for the job. Power Solar employs only professional installers. Power Solar will provide a knowledgeable consultant to help analyze your current electric bill, identify site placement, and correct solar technology for your home. Contact KCAA producer at gmail.com for a free financial savings proposal with no obligation, or call 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Again, that's KCAA producer at gmail.com or 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We are in the studio today with George Welsh. And George and I have been having I think, a fascinating conversation. Maybe you don't, but that's okay. We're enjoying ourselves here, and that's all that really counts. And we're talking about some of his past and many of his his wide diversity of professional experience he's had and some of the lessons learned out of that. And when we left off, we were talking about the need to be able to know who to go to. And George, I'll tell you, one of the most effective things that ever happened in my life, one of the most important things, turning points, it's one of those things that happens accidentally, right? It's one of those just show up when you don't feel like showing up.
Yep.
So I know you're an early morning person. You're up and at 'em doing things. I'm not so much an early person. I think morning is a apt term for the time of day I'm in morning that I'm losing my sleep. But I worked in an industry that was kind of early. But I ended up with this opportunity to go meet with this group of guys. I get invited to this businessman's breakfast in Palm Desert at a Baker Square restaurant, 7 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. Okay, fine. So I'm going to get up and go there early before I go off and do my regular work. And I kind of didn't want to go, but I went anyways because I kind of got voluntold to go. And the guy on the phone told me, I'll buy you, breakfast, just show up. And I went in there, and I was in my early 20s at the time. So I'm pretty green. I go in, and it's Palm Desert. So, what's the average age? And
You were probably younger than the busboys.
Yes. So there was the young guy in the group is actually the guy who's my current business partner, my VP. He lives in Florida, and he's about 18 years older than I am. He was hit in Vietnam the year after I was born, right? Everybody else is retired. So the average age is like deceased, right? So you go around the table, and as they talk, okay, there's a retired bank president out of New York City. There's a guy that was high up in the State Department. There's a guy that owns a chain of restaurants, and I knew all the restaurants. One of the largest and most well-known real estate brokers in Orange County. I go through all these people, right? And I'm just sitting at the table as they go around the just talking to each other. I'm like, oh, how did I get in here, Yeah. So I ended up going back pretty much every week. Missed very few meetings for like the next 5 years. Yeah. The idea was show up, shut up, and listen, because these guys knew things. Yeah. And they'd been around the block so many times, and they had done so much. And I think that was very pivotal to me learning from the gray hairs. And I think about that when I see these 40 under 40 and young professionals groups. I'm like, okay, you got it wrong. That's not who you need to hang out with. Right. You need to hang out with the geezers.
Yeah. You're going to compete against the other 39 and the 40 under 40.
That's right.
Yeah, but the ones who are in the 80 over 80, they're the ones who've got they're probably hobbled over or using wheelchairs or walkers because they've got lots of injuries.
They've got
from the
scars.
decisions they've made.
Yeah, and they've learned it all, and they're happy to share it.
Yeah.
That was one of the most pivotal moments. And again, but my current business partner came out of that group. We became friends. We were friends for over 10 years before we did a project together. But we just got along really well. And the guy that ran the group, interesting guy, he was a quadriplegic, one of the last of the polio victims, like literally a week or two before the Salk vaccine came out.
Right.
He came down with it. He had been in the Air Force in the Caribbean. Went from a big, tall, muscular guy to quadriplegic in a wheelchair. But from the wheelchair, he ended up becoming an extremely successful stockbroker and ran the LA office for one of the big brokerage firms. He was instrumental in funding some of the first projects my partner and I did. So all this goes back to, show up and find mentors and listen. And for a decade or more, I never would have thought I'd have done business with these people.
Yep.
I just wanted to listen.
Another point to your 40 under 40 is, I mentioned, I was the senior VP of a company when I was 24 years old, okay, running the construction operations. And as I grew and we expanded, I kept hiring younger people than me to be my superintendents. And it wasn't until I think I was about 28 when I hired my first 55-year-old guy.
Best
a
superintendent
real
you ever
old
hired, huh?
guy,
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, my life became so easy because instead of having to tell people what to do or remind them what they need to fix, I had people who came to me and said, "Here's what we're doing next week."
Yeah, here's what you need to get me to support me. Here's the resources I need.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I talked to so and so, and he doesn't have his stuff. Can you get on them so we can get the logistics?
Oh, a good general superintendent is worth their weight in gold.
Oh.
In gold.
And it's funny. I had two guys who were in their mid 60s, in the late 80s, and one I could put on a 50-acre site, and he would just make that place sing. Mm-hmm. And if I put the other one there, he would die. Yeah. He needed to be in a 5,000 square foot office space that had a 30-day schedule, and he had to be able to do and so learning that not only can these people mentor you and do it, they have unique skill sets.
That's right.
All of which can benefit.
So the general superintendent, to me, if the construction manager is the conductor, the general superintendent is the choreographer and director of the ballet.
Yes.
And it is a beautiful thing. You watch a 16-hour concrete pour.
Yeah.
And you watch just the rhythm of that. It's a beautiful thing to watch.
Right.
Just all these trucks lined up one after another. No concrete is old. Trucks are always there when they need to be, and traffic isn't blocked for miles around. It's just a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah, yeah. And those are skills that are learned from doing.
That's right.
You
Experience. A lot of experience. I agree, and I've always appreciated. Well, both my partners are older and wiser than I am. My third partner is actually older than my partner in Florida.
So they're in the 40s.
At least twice, yeah. No, but I like not having to be the smartest person. And when I go places, people they call me the land guy. Okay, you're the expert in the land stuff, and I am. I've been doing it for decades. But the truth is, both my partners know much more than I do about it, and probably more than I will ever know about it. I like having the freedom of not being forced to make decisions on everything. I have people that know more than me and can correct things and can provide advice and come up with solutions and create creative ideas that I can't come up with on my own.
Yeah, and I think that, even going back further, you'll probably look at your own life and say, there was this, whether there's a relative or a friend of a relative or something earlier in your younger life that said, this is interesting.
Right. Yeah. So we're going to have to put a bow on this. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, George. I don't know if it went the direction you thought it would go, but I've just always enjoyed talking to you anyways, even if we're not recording it.
Yes.
But that's what we were talking the other day. I'm thinking we got to put this on recording because I just always enjoy talking with you. I've been talking to George Welsh. He's a licensed architect. He's an educator. Started the construction management degree at New School of Architecture Design that I now run, and I've been very blessed to be a part of that. And I just really appreciate George, who was a mentor in my life as well, and I consider a friend. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. It catches every week on KCAA Thursdays at 3 p.m. live, 1050 a.m., 106.5 and 102.3 FM, or catch us on the archives, kcaaradio.com, or on your favorite podcast platform. We will see you next week, and between now and then, go do something different this week.
C